Okay, so we'll review a little bit. I'll do some of the footnotes because we don't have that much left to the end of the chapter, and I'm not going to go into the next chapter tonight. So, um, and we may have a slightly shorter share today. So, so we're talking about Yishmael, right? And we're talking about how Yishmael is considered to be a separate entity, right, other than the Arba Malchios, because the Arba Malchios, as we said, they only took them. Those are the ones who took the Malchus from Yisrael, and those the Arba Malchus are, as we said, Bavel, Paras, Yavan, and Edom. Those are the Arba Malchios. So Yishmael is, right, according to the way that we're explaining it in this chapter, is that Yishmael has his own koach, his own schus, and therefore he's not considered to be one of the Arba Malchios. And we saw there was on page Shin Samach Daled, we saw that we brought in the Yalkut. And the Yalkut, we'll just read a little bit. Let's read a little bit of Shin Samach Daled, and we'll review a little bit of what we said before. So the Yalkut, on the bottom of Shin Samach Daled, he has the quote from the Medrash. He says, "And Nisan Hashvi Achar Advarim Ha'eleh, Hayad Dvar Hashem al Avram, L'chol HaNeviim Ne'Rebbe." Okay, the next line, Rebbe Lezer Omer, Hera Kodesh Baruch Hu LeAbram Avinu B'Bris Ben Abasarim Arba Malchiot. He showed them four Malchiot, Moshla v'Ovdon, their ruling and their destruction and their loss. Shenemar v'Yomer Elav Kchali Egla Mishuleshes Zu Malchus Edom. The pasuk says this. Right at the beginning of the pasuk says Egla Mishuleshes is three calves, right? Egla dasha, which is like a threshing calf. Eiz Mishuleshes Malchus Yavan. That's the Malchus Yavan is compared to the goats. Shenemar Tzeriz Migdal Meod. Pasuk from Daniel. Ve'ayol Mishulash Ze Malchus Madai Uparas. Shenemar Ayol Shera Isa B'Chabala Karnayim. Okay, so that's the Madai Uparas. V'Tor Elu B'nei Yishmael Tor Loshon Aramis Shor Tor. Okay, so that's the fourth, as we saw in this Mal Yalkut. So the fourth of the Malchios is considered here to be Yishmael. And why is it called a Tor? Because a Tor in Aramaic is the Aramaic word for shore, and so that's what Yishmael is. So what happens here is that there's going to be a tzemed. There's going to be a pair, right, of between the shore Zachar. Yishmael is considered here to be the ox, and the Nekeva, that's Edom, is the Eglah. So here the Medrash is talking about how, in the end of days, there's going to be a combination of Edom and Yishmael. Edom and Yishmael, of course, what they share in common is that they are both descendants of Abraham Avinu, right? As opposed to the other Malchios, Paras, Bovel, those have nothing to do with Abraham Avinu, but Yishmael and nothing to do with it. They're from a different family altogether. But Edom and Yishmael are, right, the two nations which are descended from Abraham Avinu, and at the end of days, as we saw, that they will get together and they will be combined, joined together, and as joined together, they will be, as it says, right, as Chazal say, Eila Eretz, woe to the Eretz Yisrael, when we have to confront this combination of the Zachar and the Keva, of Yishmael, which is the shore, and the Zachar, and Edom, which is the Nekeva. Yifatchu v'yishadadu et kol ha'amakim. So they will destroy all of the places, all of the valleys. The Gozal and the Gozal in the pasuk, right? There's the bird. That's Yisrael. That's like a Yonah. It's compared to Yonah. So as we pointed out, that the Medrash in the top of Shin Samachay, we'll review it outside, that the Medrash has four Malchios, but different, first of all, in a different order, in a reverse chronological order. First comes Edom, and then Yavan, and then Paras, with the exclusion of Bavel. So the first question is, what happened to Bavel? Why isn't Bavel in the equation? And the second question is how did Yishmael get into the equation? Right. So here we seem to see a substitution of Yishmael for Bavel in the traditional listing of the Arba Malchios. That was what we pointed out. And in the second paragraph on Shin Samachay, we pointed out that the Medrash Tanchuma, excuse me, not the Tanchuma, the Yalkut that we just read is very similar to the Shita of the Ramban, who says that Yishmael, excuse me, the Shita of the Ibn Ezra, who says that Yishmael is one of the Albar Malchios, and as we saw, the Ramban disagrees with it. The Ramban says that Ibn Ezra didn't understand what was going on because he didn't understand that the nature of the Arba Malchus are the ones who took the Malchus from Israel and not Yishmael. Yishmael is not included in the list of Arba Malchus. And as we saw in the footnote Vav at the bottom of the page, you can see it again inside, right, the quote from the Ramban in Parshas Bolak, Rabbi Avram, Rabbi Ezra nishtabesh bazeh. Rabbi Avram made a mistake. V'chnis b'en Malchus Yishmael, he put the Malchus Yishmael into the list, Ki nofal pachdam alav, because the pachad of the Yishmaelim descended upon the Ibn Ezra, because he lived among them and he knew their power and their strength, and so then he was misled by the circumstances, the political circumstances of his time, into misinterpreting the listing of the Arba Malchios. Okay, so that's what we saw. Okay, so then the last paragraph is what we'll start reading again inside on page Sin Samachay. Chibur bein Esav liYishmael. So we see here is in the Medrash that there's going to be a chibur. There's going to be a connection, a combination between Esav and Yishmael. V'nireh. Shekavanat Chazal shekodem biyat HaMashiach yeh chibur ben Esav Yishmael. That's what they're saying. Ukeshehem yitchabru yachad yeh churban. So this combination of Esav and Yishmael is going to lead to churban. V'kloshon hazeit ranan sham, as the Meforish of the Yalkut says, v'chein b'nei Yishmael hayu me'olam hamachrivim biyoter. The Yishmaelim are the most destructive of all nations. They destroy for the sake of destruction, and so therefore, when they will team up with Edom, so this will bring Churban. Right, get rid of, right, destroy. Kalei is to destroy Seir. That's Yishmael. Excuse me, Esav. Seir is Esav. V'chosno, and his father-in-law. Because, as we know, Esav married Yishmael's daughter, so Yishmael is the father-in-law of Esav, and we say in the Slichos, Kalei destroy Seir, that's Esav, Chosno, and his father-in-law Yishmael, V'yalu l'tzio Moshiach, and then the end of the piyut is, and the Redeemer will come to Tzion. Dahainu sheyesh po shtei shvarim. We have two oxen who are connected, they're mated together, they come together in a zivug. Okay. So then there's a long footnote here, and let's take a look at that. Okay, so this we did not see on last week, so let's look at the footnote Zion at the bottom. So Aleph Hey, that's the Omar the editor, the Mechaber, the Mesader. Rabbeinu ha'arich b'inyan hachibur ben Yishmael ve'Edom. Okay, so he says that the Rav Moshe, right, was marich. He spent a lot of time explaining this connection between Yishmael and Edom. Avolo piresh et inyan hotzad Bavel mishmot hamalchiot. But Rav Moshe in the Shir did not explain why Bavel was excluded. Right? That's right. He explains why Yishmael was put in there, because the Medrash is emphasizing that at the end of days, right, not necessarily to do with, connected to the inyan of the Arba Malchios, at the end of days, so there will be a chibur between Esav and Yishmael, and that's what this message is talking about. That's what Moshe emphasized. But what about Bavel? How did Bavel get removed from the list, and what's the significance of that? Ubehekshir was that. So this is the editor speaking. So Matsati Shahabar Benel. So he says, I found in the parish of the Barbanel, but parish Yeshuos Meshicha al Pirkei Rebbe Lezer. The Barbanel wrote a parish on Pirkei Rebbe Lezer. Remember, Pirkei Rebbe Lezer is a old medrash attributed to Rebbe Lezer, the Tana Rebbe Lezer, and this Yalkut that we've been reading on the previous page is taken from the Pirkei Rebbe Lezer, because the Yalkut is a later medrash, right? So he was took it from the Pirkei Rebbe Lezer, but so the Barbanel wrote a parish on the Pirkei Rebbe Lezer, and he explains the medrash, and so the editor says umipaat chavivu tadvarim, and because of the nice, right, the dearness of what he wrote. Avi chelek nikar milashon al sham. So we're going to see quotations now from the Abarbanel, which is relevant and a very interesting perception of things. Now remember, the Abarbanel lived. When did the Abarbanel live? Where are my experts in medieval history? Right?
He lived during Columbus time. He was during Inquisition.
Right. So he was in the Inquisition. Right. So he lived in Columbus's time. He was in the Inquisition. He was expelled from. He was the Grand Minister of. He was a very powerful person in Spain. And then he emigrated to Italy, and he wrote as Perushim, and he had a long and eventful life. Everywhere he went, he rose to leadership positions, and his commentary on the Chumash and he was a very prolific author. So at the time. So here he has a parish. Okay, so
the whole startup known as America.
They said that he funded it. He was the treasurer of Ferdinand and Isabella back in 1492. Right. So the fact that we have America, like this discovery of America, can be attributed to the Jews. Whether Columbus was a Jew or not, I don't know, but anyway, let's go on. Vine. So this is quotation. Vine niskuru hamalchiot b'dvarav me'amuchar el hamukdam. So first of all, he relates to the question, why do we go backwards in time? Why is this in reverse chronological order, from the later one to the earlier one? Lefi. Shehaita machshavto yitbarach mishotetet be'edom asher kilanu, because the Baal HaMedrash, right, he was thinking, Rabbi Lezer, he was thinking about Edom, who destroyed us. Ve'asher dima lanu. Right? So I don't know exactly what he means by dima. Right? Somebody who can tell me exactly how that verb is used there. V'shenitarech yoter galuto. And his galus is the longest. In other words, he was talking about going back, looking at the end of time, and seeing the final galus is going to be Edom. V'ki'ilu hera otam HaKadosh Baruch Hu keseder malatam v'rishatam. And he showed, HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed them in this kind of midrashic, prophetic, semi-prophetic vision, right? According to the order of how bad they were, right? Okay? And the worst is Edom. So Edom came first. Edom was pushed to the top of the list. V'lachein, I can turn the page, continuing the footnote on Shin Samach Vav. Hitchil be'Edom. That's why the Medrash started with Edom, shehaita ke'egla dasha, which was like a threshing calf. Ve'acharav zachar Yavan, shekadam le'Edom memshalto. And then he mentioned Yavan, who preceded Edom. Ve'acharav zachar Madai u'Paras, shnehem ka'am echad. But Madai and Paras are always mentioned together in the Tanakh, right? In the Megillah Esther, right? We know that they always go together. They were sister kingdoms, so to speak. The Medes and the Persians. Shneim kam echad kadmu b'mishaltam li'Yavan, and that's the history. Hamnam b'mashalo zachar Bavel. What happened to Bavel? V'zachar b'mkomo Yishmaelim. V'hu. right? So this is Shehodia, Hatana Rebbe Lezer. The Tana Rebbe Lezer lets us know, Bazeh, Ma sheyeh atid liot, achar yamav kishesh me'od shana. So he was saying is that through the Ruach HaKodesh of the Tana, he was predicting things that were going to happen 600 years later, after his time. V'hu, sheka'asher kam Muhammad Navi HaYishmaelim, b'tchilat inyano. Right? So what year was Muhammad rise to his fame and power? Anybody have at their fingertips the information?
7th century.
Hmm?
7th century.
7th century, right? Okay, and so that was the beginning of Islam in the 7th century. Okay, so halach. So he went. V'imo chil gadol me'ha'arvim, and with him a big army of Arabs. So remember, so the birth of Islam was in Arabia, Saudi Arabia, or Arabia. That's where Mecca is. Those are the foundation, the founding of Islam was there. But he went with a great number of his Arab soldiers al Eretz Bavel, and they conquered Bavel. They conquered what today is present day Iraq. V'kablu habavliim kulam dato v'emunato. And the Bavliim and the Babylonians, right, the people who live in Bavel, right, in Baghdad, right, etc., accepted his religion. Ve'yeh le'am Yishmael, and they became like one with the Ishmaelim, as it says in their books. Okay, so again, and now he's talking again. The Ibn Ezra had the ability to look at things from hindsight. So he's explaining what was happening in terms of the history that we know. So he's saying is that the reason that Bavel was excluded from the list is because ultimately Bavel merged with Yishmael in terms of religion. In terms of religion, so we know that the caliphates in Baghdad were the strong. That was the center of Islam at the time. Hine imken Yishmael shenizkar kan hu atzmo Bavel. So he says that the reason that Yishmael is mentioned here is because Yishmael is really Bavel. It's the same. Right? They come from the same place, or they come at least from the same religion, the same belief, the same faith. V'kina oto Rebbe Eliezer b'ruach hakodesh asher bo b'shem Yishmael. So he gave the Bavel the name Yishmael because he foresaw with his ruach hakodesh that Bavel would be subsumed under Yishmael. Imeyot shetor hu gamkein Lashon Bavli, Vayalo Lomar Ze Bavel, right? Okay, so because when we say that the word Tor, right? Again, the pasuk uses the word Tor, and we translate it into shore. Okay, so and we say that so the shore is Yishmael. Okay, but it so happens that the language of Bavel was Aramaic. Right? And I don't know what the language of Muhammad was not Aramaic; it was Arabic, right? But the language of the Bible was Aramaic. So that's why Chazal talk about that. They talk about it in that the Torah is an ox in Aramaic. Aval gila mashiyah tid mimashe bavlim yu l'am Yishmael b'datam. So Rabbi Lezer in the Medrash revealed what would be in the future, that the Babylonians would be one nation with Ishmael and their religion. And so now he goes on through the history, right? This is the Barbanel speaking. Shebachriv Titus et Yerushalayim, when Titus destroyed Yerushalayim, Hayu ha'amim kulam tachat memshalet dat Romi. Okay, so that was under dat Romi. Okay, so we have to. Okay. Well, again, that's a little bit of a stretch, okay, but it depends what he means by dat Romi, right? Because Christianity wasn't yet that prevalent, but in any event, Bavlim uparsim v'yavanim, so that includes the Greeks, the Persians, and the Babylonians, the Greeks, and the Persian. V'kulam hayu nikraim Romim, but they were all under Rome, because the Roman Empire, Lamaisa, right, ruled the world, right, ruled the civilized world. Mipat harosh hamoshel bahem she'eromi, because the Romans were the rulers they had conquered most of the civilized world. V'kulam hayu b'churban abayis, and they're all included in the churban abayis because they're all part of the Roman Empire. And then the Goyim divided into two religions, two camps. Because all of the people in the West, right, the Europeans, right, including Italy and the Greeks, nitnatzru, they became Christians. And they took the religion of Yeshu. And we call them Bnei Edom. We call the Christian world Edom. Omnam, on the other hand, Bavel u'Mitzrayim, Paras u'Madai, ve'Ashur, v'chol Bnei Arav, lachu lahem achar kach emunat Muhammad, v'nikru Yishmaelim. So he's describing that at the time of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, right, there hadn't yet been this division between the Christian world and the Muslim world, but that happened, right? And so we have the East versus the West. The West is under the domination of the Christians, and the East is under the domination of the Muslims. Ume'ela nafza kol haaretz, and this is from this spread out the whole land. Edom Yishmael. V'tzafak kol zeh beruach hanevuah zeh ha'eloki. Right, and the great Tana Rabbi Shmuel had the Ruach HaNevuah, had the Ruach HaKodesh, and he saw all this. V'lachein, kara et Romi Edom, v'et Bavel kara Yishmael al Shem Sofam. So then, when he looked at this, so he says, okay, there is a Roman world, right, a Christian world, and a Bavel world. So he gave them those two names. So he spoke about Edom, and he spoke about Yishmael al Shem Sofam, because at the end, those are going to be the predominant nations, right? The predominant cultures. There's going to be the Western culture and the Eastern culture. V'nei Kabbalat Romi Emunat Yeshua Notzri, right? The acceptance of Rome, of the faith of Yeshu, the Christian, haya b'kamo 250 shana achrei Rebbe Eliezer. Right? It was about 250 years after Rebbe Eliezer. Rebbe Eliezer was at the time of the Churban, right? So it was, right, so the Christianity took hold a couple hundred years after that. The Kabbalat HaBavli Emunat Muhammad ve'yotam l'dat Yishmael haya b'kamo Taf Kuf Nun Shanim Acharei Rebbe Eliezer, like 550 years after Rebbe Eliezer, and like we said in the 7th century. And this shows the power of the foresight of how Rabbi Eliezer was able to foresee the future. And that's why he said, and woe to when it happens that there will be a pairing of the Zachar with the Nekeva, and they will destroy the land. It was said at a time when they're all one nation. At the time, the shore which is Bavel and the calf which is Romi, and only these two were mentioned. Because they're the head and the end of the Malchios. Pam Hashor Shem Abavlim Ishmaelim, because also, right, who are the rulers of Eretz Yisrael? So sometimes it was the Eastern, the Bavlim and the Ishmaelim. Upam Ha'agala Bat Edom HaNotzrim, and sometimes it was the Christians, as we know, the Crusaders. So he says, so the rulership over the dominion over over Eretz Israel also went back and forth between these two powers, these two religions. They will destroy the land. Uperish Gozal al Yisrael. Right? Why is Gozal? Right? So it's interesting. Place there's a play on words. Is Yisrael Afishaya Ashuk v'Gazul Kol Yemei V'dei Malchios. He relates the word Gozal as a play on words to the word Gazul. Ashuk and Gazul, they were oppressed, they were stolen from, they were robbed the whole time. He says, see how much of the future of developments were already apparent in this wonderful medrash. And how many of the svaros which I spoke about have become verified. That's what we call Yishmaelim, that's the Bavliim, Shekulam Ayu Nicholim Mishalat Romi. They're all included in the Romans. V'kulam Ba'uim Titus Lachiv Beis Hashem. V'yatza mizeh she'ayishmaelim nichlu b'dalat malchios. And so he says it's perfectly legitimate, U'chamosh Zagarti b'tamar hagimel me'amayan habet, which is different sections of his book, V'lo kedivrei haRamban. Okay, so he argues with the Ramban. He says that the Ibn Ezra was right, because the Ibn Ezra said that Yishmael was one of the Arba Malchias. He wasn't listed in the original Arba Malchias, but says the Rabbeim, that's because Yishmael is just the second half of Bavel. So it's just like, because ultimately the Arba Malchias are talking about, if we take a kind of a telescope everything, collapse everything into just a general scheme of things, we have the Bavel slash Yishmael on the one side. Those are the people who follow from the east, the people who follow Muhammad, and we have the Edom on the other side, the people who follow the Christianity, and these are the two principal forces at work, right? The Christians versus Muslims. And what the Medrash was telling us, right, hundreds and thousands of years ago, right, we're talking about a couple of thousand years ago, was that Lamaisa, everything can be reduced to that. This is the end of history is going to be reduced to this conflict. Again, so we saw the conflict as being between Paras, again, in the previous chapter. It was Paras against Edom, right? And he is saying, no, that it's not Paras against Edom, because in this Medrash, we don't have Paras playing a significant role. In this Medrash, we have Bavel playing Yishmael playing the significant role. It's Yishmael and Edom, right? Not Paras and Edom. It's Yishmael and Edom, and Yishmael is the one who is taking the place of Bavel, because at the end of the day, right, the people of Bavel adopted the religion of Yishmael, and so therefore that's Yishmael. Now we could also understand that Paras is also included in that, because Paras also accepted the religion of Yishmael. So it's the Yishmael side of the, right? Let's call it everything east of Eretz Israel is the Yishmael side of thing, right? And the Western, the European side of Eretz Israel, that's the other side, and that's the two forces that are at war with each other until the end of days. And this is what we are experiencing: this battle of call it the titans between the forces of the east and the forces of the west, and that's it. Any questions, Jory?
Well, as you were speaking, I got a new question, which is stronger in my mind. So Paras, I'm confused now. The question you raised yourself,
Yeah.
that why Paras adopted the religion, fine, but the different players. This harks back to my earlier question that I was going to ask is, if you could remind us how Ibn Ezra. I mean, there's a lot of players. We got the Arbabanel explaining the Midrash of Rabbi Elazar. And what did Ibn Ezra do again, as opposed to the Ramban?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, we'll review that.
And then how does that all
Okay.
work out with Paras and who's taking which? It's very complicated.
Okay. So just the first step is that just what everybody knows. Okay. Before we get into this, right? The common knowledge, right? common knowledge, meaning people who know a little bit about this, right, or study these things. The basic information is that we have the Arba Malchios, right, which were given to us in the Medrash, from Bereshis, right? Tohu, Vavo, V'choshech, Al Pnei Tehom. Right? We have the Arba Malchios. Those are the Bavel, Paras, Yavan, and Edom. Okay. Comes along the Ibn Ezra, right? Who lived before the Ramban, right? A little bit, right? And the Ibn Ezra, when he was thinking about the Arba Malchios, said, wait a minute, we can't leave Yishmael out of the Arba Malchios, right? Because they have to be included. Says the Ramban said to the Ibn Ezra, you're wrong, right? Because, and again, this was the idea that we saw, because the Arba Malchios were all, were the ones who took the Malchus from Yisrael, right? And Yishmael is not included because Yishmael has his own independent source of power, because being Avram Avinu prayed for him and blessed him, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, okay, Yishmael will be a great nation. So that's independent of the Arba Malchus. Okay, that's what we saw until we got to this medrash, which we've been discussing today. Right? This is a new medrash, right? This is a new medrash which has a different take on things. Okay, this medrash, right, it's telling us, does put Yishmael as one of the Arba Malchus. Okay, and it seems to be right in line with the Ibn Ezra's approach, and not with us. Okay? So good. So we have, as Moshe said, we have midrashim chalukim. Right? We can't reconcile all of the midrashim into that they can agree with each other. We have midrashim chalukim. So now what we've been doing for the last 15, 20 minutes is explaining the Abarbanel's explanation of this medrash in the Yalkut, right, which is a summary or an expansion of the Pirkei Rebbe Lezer. In the Abarbanel, who was writing a commentary on Pirkei Rebbe Lezer, right, wanted to show how great and how much foresight and how much Ruach HaKodesh Rebbe Lezer had back in the second century, first century, right, back in the times of the Tanaim, right, to foresee things. And therefore, he says that the question is a question, right, in a formal way. You could say, why did what happened to Bavel and what Yishmael was placed in? But he says this is what we find. This medrash who puts Yishmael instead of Bavel, so that's a kasha, right? Because again, at the end of the day, the traditional explanation of four Malchus includes Bavel, right? And so what would the machlokas be? So he says that this medrash is telling us from a different point of view. This medrash is telling us, if you look at the end result, right, after and look, how is it nogea lamaisa for the Jewish people at the end of days? Right? Because here we're talking about what's going to happen at the end of days. We're saying at the end of days, right, the two oxen are going to get together. The male and the female are going to get together. The Yishmael and the male is Yishmael and the female is Bavel, the female is Edom, right? And they're going to get together, and so that's how. So the Rabbeim is looking at it from the point of view of Lamaisa. What do we have? Lamaisa, we have here in our present world, right? We're living in the 16th century, right? The Rabbeim is writing, right? We have two camps. The world is divided into two camps. Right? The Eastern camp and the Western camp, the Islamic world, the world of Islam and the world of Christianity. And so now we can understand that Bavel that would make sense that the Medrash would put Bavel together with Yishmael, because at the end of the day, Bavel accepted the religion of Yishmael. So therefore, from a religious, cultural point of view, right, Bavel doesn't exist anymore as an independent player. Bavel is subsumed under the great Yishmael, right, powers of Yishmael, and Edom includes all of the nations that were on the other side of the divide. That's what we've been saying so far. So Edom includes the Greeks and all of the other and what we call Western culture. And that's what the Abarbanel is saying, and that's the pshat in this medrash.
But at the end of the day, do we get to a machloket whether uh, Edom is going to team up with Ishmaelim, or is he going to team up with Iran, or
So again, so according to the Abarbanel would say that Iran and Babel and
everything?
Ishmael are all the same, right? Because again, that's how history actually played out, right? Again, one could, if one wanted to question this, and be a little bit, skeptical, one could say, well, the Abarbanel had hindsight. He was able to he was able to reread the Medrash in light of what actually happened. Okay. Okay. For our purposes, I'm not going to go into a theological debate about, how much Ruach HaKodesh did Rebbe Lezer Hagadol have, or not, right? But because it's not so relevant, right? But what the Abarbanel is saying is that that the Medrash is which puts Yishmael instead of Bavel, right? Is an accurate reflection of the way history actually turned out, right? And so was it the great Ruach HaKodesh? Right? I hope, perhaps, that's really, right, of Rabbi Shmuel, or was it, hindsight of the Barbanel rewrite? Well, that's already a question for people who are, I can't answer the question, right? Yeah. Seder. Good. Okay, so that's clear. Thank you for asking. And okay, let's go back to the text above. Okay, that's enough for this. Okay, now let's finish up. Okay, right. Yeah. Let's see, just in the bold print, the last few lines of that paragraph on the bottom there. V'itba'er gamkein shebesof hagalut yavo kulam al haaretz. They're all going to gang up on us. That's another reference to his other place in his work. She'atidin adayim b'nei Edom lavo al eretz hatzvi. Right, the Bnei Edom are going to attack Eretz Hatzvi is Eretz Yisrael. Lekavsha to conquer it. V'shiasu Yishmaelim aleihem lemilchama, and Yishmaelim will fight the Edomites. V'yilachamu elu im elu, and they'll fight with each other. Uben David yitzmach misham v'yilachem imahem. Right. So exactly right. So the partnership they're going to fight with each other, and Moshiach is going to come and say, okay, you guys can knock heads all you want, right? At the end of the day, I'm going to, the Kodesh Baruch Hu is going to bring me in, and I'm going to be the Mashiach. Okay, let's go weiter up on top. So it says, Rabbi Yeshua, going back to the Al Af, the last line of the previous page in Shin Samachay, the Al Af sheharbe devorim shenemru be'inyan HaMashiach v'hatkufa kodem lo einam brurim dayam, even though many of the things that are said in the Midrashim are not clear. So, hadavar hazeh hu barur. And then the Rambam himself writes this in the Igeret Teiman, as we saw, right? And we'll see again in the footnote on the bottom. Shelifnei bias hamashiach yeh chibur bein Esav Yishmael. Okay, and so look at the footnote in the Rambam here. Okay, and Chet in the bottom. Aval ha'etahi kvar itbara midivrei Daniel v'Yeshayahu mishar divrei Rabotenu zal. Right, the Rambam is quoting shebiato tiyeh Kishet yad Edom ve'Arav. Both Edom and Arav, and the Arabs, will become stronger. V'kishet titpashet malchutam ba'olam. And their malchus will spread over the world. Kemo hayom hazeh, like today. V'zeh davar she'en bo safek, says Rambam. Umizeh lo yavor. This is something that has to be. V'Daniel sof ma shesiper malchus Yishmael ve'amidas machmad ve'achrav bias hagoel b'samuch, and included in the visions of Daniel is about Malchus Yishmael and the rise of Muhammad and acharav biat hagoel b'samuch. V'chein Yeshayahu bi'er sheharayal biat Mashiach. When are we going to know Mashiach is coming? He heraot mishuga, right? Because as we know, the Rambam, right, his favorite name for Muhammad was the Meshuga. Shekain Amar, and the Navi Yeshaya says, V'ra'ah rechev tzemet parashim, rechev chamor, rechev gamal. Here we're talking about a somebody riding on a donkey and riding on a camel. Lehikshiv Keshev Rav Keshev, right? So Amar Sherachav Chamor Mashiach, and so the Chamor is going to be the one who is the Mashiach. It says Shenamar Bo because it says about the Mashiach in Zechariah Ani Rochev al Chamor V'al Ayir Ben Atonot Yavo Tekev Amidat Rochev al Gamal Uhu Melech Harav. So there's going to be, I'm not quite sure how to read all of this, but it's going to be the Gamal represents the Arabs ride camels, and the Chamor is the Mashiach, and he'll come against he will rise up and overcome the kingdom of the Arabs and the Gamal. Right? Umashamar Tseme Poroshim, why does it say a pair of riders? Right? As we said, Klomar Hizdaveg Shtei Umot. It's the coming together, right? The mating, the coupling of these two nations. Shem Edom Yishmaelim, Ubinyan Zayid Bar Menachal. Okay, let's say this. This is the different going into the different visions of Daniel, which I'm not going to go into right now. So this is clear. Okay, so what does it have to do with us? So it's anybody's bet, but we can't know. But if we see that that there's going to be a teaming up of Edom and Yishmael against us, we shouldn't be surprised. Okay, and who knows what's going to happen? Okay? Because it's more than likely, just from my own political opinions, right? More than likely that in the next United States elections, right, there's going to be an anti-Israel president. The Republicans and Democrats are turning anti-Israel, and so that who knows? Because Baruch Hu did us a great chesed with by getting rid of Pamela for at least 4 years, but that was a great chesed. You see the hashgacha pratis. The Democrats were so stupid. They put Biden up, right? They thought that they could get away with it, right? And then they figured that they would control him from behind and do whatever they wanted. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's chesed was that they didn't get away with it. Baruch Hashem. Okay, but who knows? Keep davening, so at least we'll be zachet a little bit more chesed. Right? A lot more chesed. Okay, so let's finish up the chapter here. Right? I don't know if we'll finish it, but we'll right away we'll finish. Milchemet al-Malchiyot b'Mashiach, Sidra al-Malcha shel Malchiyot. Hinei Yalkut mamshich levayer Sidra al-Malcha shel Malchiyot as Hofam. Okay, the Yalkut is going to go and explain the different things. Right? And he says here, if again I'm not going to read it all, but he says here in the paragraph, in the bold print, in the second time it has bold print, V'chein ad shelo yavo ha'erev yitzmach oran shel Yisrael. Shenemar v'yale et erev yeh or. The Medrash says that in the evening there will be the light. So he says, Kan yesh remez shel ifnot erev shel ha'elef hashishi yatchil yot or leklal Yisrael. That at the end of the evening of the sixth millennium, that's when there's going to be light for Klal Yisrael. Nitzachon al Yishmael b'fnei atzmo. Right? Smichat David, the growth of David, the growth of the Tzemach David is coming from Nitzachon al Yishmael. V'nei, בהמשך המדרש יש יחס מיוחד למלכות ישמעאל מחוץ לדל מלכיוס. The Medrash talks specifically about Malchus Yishmael outside of besides the four Malchus. She'av shechozer le'azkir et Malchus Bavel, even though it mentions Bavel, hu moneh b'nifrad et Malchus Yishmael. V'chein niyaches et hanitzachon shel Melech HaMashiach lenitzachon al Yishmael b'ofen miyuchad. Amar Abraham v'yam mitpalel lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Abraham prayed, shelo yishtabdu banav barba malchiot. V'nafla alav shnat tardema v'yashan lo. He had this tremendous, he fell asleep, right? The slumber came over him. V'chiesh l'cha adam shu yichshocheh v'yashem v'chol yitpalel. How could he daven and be sleeping at the same time? Ella shelilamdecha sheyavrom yashen mikoach hatfilah. The power of the tefillah put him to sleep. I don't know what that means. Kadesh lo yishtabdu banav. Ema zu malchus haravis shenamar dechelo ve'abtani cheshcha. It talks about the. It says the pasuk says Ema chashecha etc. These are the four malchios. So Ema zu malchus haravis shenamar dechilu ve'abtani, because Daniel describes them as fearful. Chashecha zu malchus yavan. She'achshichu einayim shel Yisrael, they darkened the eyes of Yisrael. Gedola zu malchus madai, she'gadol imkor Yisrael v'chinam, as in the times of Haman, they sold the Jewish people. Nofelet zu malchus Bavel, she'never nafla Bavel, the pasuk says that Bavel has fallen. Alav, but then the last pasuk says, the last word in the pasuk, again, we're dashing the pasuk says, right, Ema, Chashecha, right, Gedola, Nofeles Olav. So each word is being darshaned here. Olav Elu b'nei Yishmael. Sha'aleihem ben David Yitzmach. Right, David will grow, will flourish, coming out of the b'nei Yishmael. Shenemar oivav al bishboshes ve'alav yitzitz Yisrael. His enemies I will give boshet and embarrassment. Ve'alav yitzitz Yisrael, and the crown of the Mashiach will grow out of that. Okay, lo nivru alolo ela eitzim legehenim. All of these nations were made only to provide fuel for Gehenna. Shenemar v'nei tanur ashan v'ein tanur ela Gehenna. Right? Okay, the pasuk says that there was a tanur ashan, there was a smoking furnace, and they breathed bein of asorim. V'ein tanur ela Gehenna. Shenemar nu'um Hashem asher or lo b'tzion v'tanur lo b'shalayim. נמצא מפורש בחז"ל, שכל המלכויות סמליכות מלכוס בית דוד, מתייחסת דווקא לבני ישמעאל. Okay, באמת זה דברי, just to summarize, ובאמת זה דבר פלא, שהדברים האלה נכתבו סמוך לחורבן. He said, now Moshe is just summarizing this. These things were written near the Churban. שהרי רבי אלעזר הגדול היה מתלמידי רבי יוחנן בן זכאי שהיה בחורבן. We're talking about Rabbi Elazar HaGadol, the Tanur Rabbi Elazar, who was a Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai was at the Churban, so we're talking about the 2nd century. V'aviv halach lavi korban, v'shashav b'no halach l'yeshiva shel Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, k'mavur b'chilas perek ha'od. And his father even was alive at the time of when he brought a korban. The Beis Hamikdash still existed at the time of his father, when his son went to learn in yeshiva. He says at that time, you see how much foresight Chazal had, again, echoing what we saw in the Barbanel, right, that there was no Zecher LeMalchus Yishmael. Who would have thought? There are some filthy Arabs wandering in the desert. Muhammad HaMeshuga, and crazy Muhammad, Niftar B'Sivot HaShana, 631 למספרם, 631 in the 7th century, וזה יותר מ-500 שנה אחר החורבן, more than 500 years after the חורבן. וזה נורא והיום לראות איך חז"ל כתבו שמלכוס ישמעאל תהיה כל כך חזקה לפני ביאת המשיח, ודווקא עליהם בן דוד יצמח. ועין עוד בילקוט של על ישעיה, ששם כתוב באופן יותר חד, it's written even more clearly. Until now we've been learning the Yalkut on and Chumash and Parshas Lech Lecha, but now the Yalkut also is on Tanakh. It says Kiminei Chorvot Nadadu. It says in the pasuk in Yeshaya. Haya Rabbi Shmuel, because of the swords they moved around. Haya Rabbi Shmuel Omer Shalosh Melchamos Shel Mehuma Atidin B'nei Yishmael Lasot B'Achrit. There's going to be 3 wars of Mehuma, of great confusion, and great terror that the Ishmaelites are going to bring against the Jewish people at the end of the days. Achat meyam umipnei keshet drucha, because the pasuk talks about a bow, a drawn bow, and the sea. Echad beyabash on land, mipnei cherab netusha, that's the sword. Ve'achad bekrach gadol shehu kaved mishneim, one in the big city, which is going to be a heavier battle than all the others. Shenemar b'nei kol b'milchama. Umisham ben David yitzmach. And he will show us the destruction of all the sides. Umisham yavo l'Eretz Yisrael, shenemar mize ba me'edom, madua ba'edom, etc. Kam mefurash, sheyarer Yishmael yarer mulchamot, v'zeh yeh mitzuraf l'biat HaMashiach l'ritzichon al malchus Edom. Ve'agav, he says, an interesting point, zenemar b'shem Rabbi Yishmael. This medrash is said in the name of Rabbi Yishmael. Umevur b'tesis yishonim and yuma shu nikra al shmo. Rabbi Yishmael was called after the original Yishmael. Interesting that right? So Rabbi Shmuel is telling us what's going to happen with Yishmael. Nimsa, top of the page, Midrashim Elu, Mevuar, Sheyesh Haftacha Miyuchedet Shekol Yisrael Yinatzech et Yishmael. There's a special promise that we'll be victorious over Yishmael. Ad Shenichitzachon Hazeh Hu Ma Shematzmiach et Malchus Beis David. This is going to give rise to the Malchus Beis David. V'l'hamur ze muvan, it's understood, שזה פשוט, שעצם הגאולה היא חזרת המלכות שנלקחה מישראל, וניתנה לדלת מלכיוס. So again, putting everything together, right? The return of Malchus is the return of Malchus, which was taken away and given to the Daled Malchios. Aval milvad ze yeh gam nitzachon miyuchad al Yishmael, kivan sheyesh lo zchut Malchut b'fnei atzmo. Okay, so again, so now Rav Moshe, if you remember last week, we spent a lot of time talking about how the original Maharal gave two terutzim, gave two explanations of how we should fit Yishmael into everything. Is Yishmael part of the Arba Malchios, or is he something separate, right? And so Rav Moshe says, Elu ve'elu, they're both true, right? That there's going to be a victory over the Arba Malchios, but there will be a special victory over Yishmael, who has his own independent space, and that's where we are holding today. So every Hezbollah guy that we managed to, or Hamas guy that we managed to get rid of, right? It's just another step towards the ultimate victory of bring Ben Alehem, Ben David Yitzmach. This will be the flourishing and the growth of the Tzemach David, which will come. V'kiven she'anu omdim l'krat hasof shel hasugya shel Mashiach b'per chelek, right? So, right, so because again we skipped, this is towards the end of the book. Tzarich lizkor ech she'akol mitkayem leineinu. Right, Moshe was writing 30 years ago, right? Everything is happening right before our very eyes. And just as so far we've seen everything happening, everything else is going to happen as well. Malchus Yishmael is something terrifying. And that's going to be the ultimate victory over Yishmael. And may we speedily see the end and the destruction of all the forces of Yishmael and all the forces of trying to destroy the Jewish people. And B'ezrat Hashem, next week, Hoshana Abba Yerushalayim, will be able to celebrate together and have a real celebration. B'ezrat Hashem. I was just noticing today, today was Rosh Chodesh, you daven in the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh, also in all the Chagim, the Musaf. There's an emphasis. Just notice that there's emphasis on the word simcha, right? That we'll come to Eretz Yisrael and we'll come to the Beis Hamikdash and nismach kulanu, and we'll all have, there will be simcha, right? And Shirei David Amir Mevlecha, right? It talks the over and over again. When the Anshe Knesset Geula gave us the words of the Tfilas Musaf, they talked about simcha. It's going to be a tremendous source of simcha. It's not just that we're going to be able to have korbanos, or be able to see, okay, Beseder, we can do all the avoda, we can bring it. But the fact that there will be a restoration will bring a tremendous simcha to our hearts, and we'll see how everything comes together, and we'll be able to feel the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our midst, and be zocha to do the avodas Beis Hamikdash, and all of the other avodas, and may we be zocha to a Mashiach b'mehera b'yameinu. Okay. Friends. Okay, next week, again, I don't think we're going to do the next chapter. I haven't decided what we're going to do. The next chapter is a little bit esoteric. But we'll Mirza Hashem, find an appropriate chapter to section to start with, but we skipped quite a bit. Okay, so have a good afternoon, everybody, evening, afternoon, and B'ezrat Hashem, have a good Yontif, right? Everybody should have a Chag Matan Torah, right? And be Makabel Torah, MS, and then on Sunday, Mr. Hashem, we'll be able to rejoin. Call to be well.